Hello and welcome again to the Writer Review. This is Eric Rutt Writer, and this week we're going to be taking a look back at the 1998 crime comedy titled Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels. Now, Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels runs for an hour and 46 minutes long. It is directed by Guy Ritchie. It is written by Guy Ritchie. It is produced by Matthew Vaughn, which features some narration from Alan Ford. The score was done by David Hughes and John Murphy. The cinematography by Tim Maurice Jones, and the editing was done by Nevin Howie. And the stars of the movie are Jason Flemyng, Dexter Fletcher, Nick Moran, Jason Statham, Stephen McIntosh, Vinnie Jones, and longtime rock singing sensation Sting. So if you can combine Quentin Tarantino movies with a little bit of some Marx Brothers slapstick humor, you get Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels. So all you have to do is picture, well, let's say maybe Chico severing your fingers, or at least threatening to sever your fingers. The quirkiness may be fun to watch, but this comedy crime caper is overwhelmingly wallowing in its complexities, but it is handled quite effectively. It comes as an obvious trait that Guy Ritchie used to direct commercials. So if you see like a scene where somebody is doing something relatively minimal, you will get those close ups, like right in your face. Yes, and you see that in every commercial that you're in. Of course, he also has done his fair share of directing music videos as well. But hey, it makes no wonders. I mean, he was once, of course, married to pop sensation Madonna. Good to be married to a celebrity at times, isn't it? No? Let us move on. So the plot focuses on a big time poker star who comes from the rough side of London's East End. His name is Eddie, and he is played by actor Nick Moran, who gets hired by three alliances, and he tries to gamble his profits to a high stakes game against somebody by the name of Hatchet Harry, played by P.H. Moriarty, who is a kingpin in the gambling and porn industry. He owns a sleazy um, a sleazy strip bar, and they also do gambling. So he's pretty much almost like the top of the pie chart in this London East End community that's filled with thieves, scamps, and other assorted miscreants that surround the area. Hey, London is not always just Westminster Abbey, Tower of London, the Queen, Big Ben, and fish and chips. London is also has its fair share of criminal activity, and these guys are a ragtag group from a rather dilapidated riffraff community. I mean, they're not all sipping tea, raising their pinky fingers, and reading the London Times, tally ho. No, they're they are making the papers. They're probably making front page news, but not for the right reasons. And besides, they don't really necessarily speak in a tally-ho British accent. No, 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 no. I mean, these guys are Cockney. Sorry, you're probably more likely to hear them speak in this kind of language, my boy. Isn't that right? You know, something like that. That's the way they're kind of speaking. And, okay, I have to admit, it's a little hard to decipher. But I guess if you can understand the British lingo, because of course, even though they speak English just like you and I do, um, their English is definitely by far contrast from the English we're used to. They have different lingos. I mean, it would be the same thing too if you went to places like Ireland or Australia or any other country that speaks English. They just have different ways of saying different things. And maybe they may understand some of the things you're saying. They don't understand the things we say, we North Americans say. So, and besides, their accents are also very strong. So, at times, it can be a bit indecipherable. But it's just something that you have to get used to. You have to understand. And I try to do everything I can to adapt to what they're saying. So let's go back to the story, okay? So Harry uses dirty tactics to win because, as you all know, Hatchet Harry does not want to lose and he does not like losing. So, um, so Eddie is completely oblivious to the fact that Hatchet Harry is using dirty tactics to beat Eddie. So not only does Eddie lose his profits, which makes him completely broke, Hatchet Harry also demands him to pay even more than what he lost. So it's like he didn't go down to zero. He actually owes double the amount of the profits that he came in with and that he lost. And he was given an ultimatum of one of three things: you either pay up, or Hatchet Harry takes over the um bar that Eddie's father owns, that's Sting's character. Or the third option, you could say goodbye to your little fingers, because for every one day you miss, Hatchet Harry's right hand man, I think his name was Barry the Baptist, will cut off one finger for each day you miss. So if you miss 10 days, goodbye fingers. Do you want to keep your toes on your foot? He might probably end up going after that too. Maybe he'll even take out a shoulder or a limb. They're not afraid. Heck, they'll chop you up into pieces if they had their way. So Eddie and his friends must find the money if they're going to save their lives, save their limbs, save their reputation. Save their fingers. And Barry the... Oh, did I say Barry the Baptist? I made a mistake. His name is Benny the Baptist. And it was played by former bare knuckles fighter Lenny McLean, the late Lenny McLean. Yes, I know this is kind of a bit of a sad note to make, because to say a month, I think, before the release, Lenny McLean sadly passed away from complications with cancer. So therefore, he I guess this movie came out, in his case, posthumously. So he gives these three suckers three options: either pay up, take over the pub that's owned by Eddie's father, JD, or get their fingers severed. So Eddie and his friends, they snoop on their neighbors, who seem to be growing. Um, I believe it was a marijuana plant. Yeah, there are a couple of potheads, and in their apartment, they also happen to be crooks with a master plan to rob from the rich druggie. So they see this as an opportunity. I mean, these guys, their neighbors, are making a killing off of their marijuana plants, which is, of course, not legalized. So Eddie decides to rob from them. So while this is happening, Benny hires two bumbling thieves to confiscate some authentic antique guns for Harry. The guns eventually wind up in Eddie's hands, and they eventually rob the drug money, and the rest of the way needs no further explaining. It's basically just a cat and mouse chase between three scoundrels running away with dirty money. We have a kingpin, a drug pin, who's demanding them to find a way to get the money or have their fingers cut off. You have bumbling thugs who don't seem to know what the fuck they're doing. And everything is just happens like really, really fast. And at times it might be undecipherable. It might be at times a bit very confusing. But it's still, the excitement level, the adrenaline rush, and the energy never once slows down. So the movie, it turned out to be a very successful film back in Britain. In North America, well, that was a bit of a different story. It came out first at the Sundance Film Festival, and although it was entertainingly fun, you could still get lost in the shuffle due to the confusing plot and the English lingo in a very, very tight British film. But, and I was very confused when I first saw this movie. I was like wondering what the hell is going on? Who are these people? I mean, it's like a constant run around from danger. But it does have that feeling of a Quentin Tarantino film. You get to they introduce the characters, you understand their dilemma, you care for them. Even though there's not really a redeemingly likable character, and also the characters in this film are not some of the smartest either. They seem to put themselves in danger, the good guys. The villains also seem to be somewhat put in vulnerable situations. So either way, you get really lost in the mix. And the thing of the matter is that the druggies from the apartment who are making killing off of their their marijuana plants, they all seem to dress alike. They seem to have the same kind of accents and same kind of traits. They're low down scumbags. Eddie and his gang are a couple of scampy scoundrels, and Moriarty is and Hatchet Harry's gang, they're also big tough thugs. So it's an all out cat and mouse chase with no real cat and no real mouse. So, as always, I always root for the good guys, and I guess the good guys there are Eddie and his gang. It's not just Nick Moran, but also I think Dexter Fletcher is part of the group. Jason Statham is in it. And those are the good guys. The bad guys are, of course, Hatchet Harry, Benny the Baptist, and somebody by the name of Big Chris, played by football or soccer star Vinnie Jones, who also has had his share of negative press. Because if I'm not mistaken, didn't he once physically grabbed a rival by the balls? Not out of homosexuality, but out of anger or aggression. Because, he's kind of a bit of a thug. Because if you've ever watched English soccer, he was kind of a tough guy on the field. And of course, I guess if you have grown into a bad reputation, chances are it's your practical one-way ticket to stardom, I guess. To some, maybe not all. So it's safe to say that the characters are a little miscast also due to the fact that they might be a little bit too young and inexperienced for a very gritty film. Unlike Tarantino, who in the movie Reservoir Dogs, they used veteran performers in his films. And that doesn't include just Reservoir Dogs, but also, Pulp Fiction, Jackie Brown. Tarantino uses a lot of veteran, established performers to be in his movies. Guy Ritchie, on by way of contrast, has used some rather inexperienced people. I mean, there was no Daniel Day-Lewis or Rachel Weisz or Judi Dench or Michael Gambon or Jim Broadbent or anybody of those guys. No, they were looking for more less prolific people. Although, yes, Jason Statham went on to bigger and better things after this movie, and Vinnie Jones has also become a screen tough guy as well. I mean, these are kind of like their debuts, or at least near their debuts. But they did, but for the rather inexperienced or rather less prolific cast, they still did manage to pull it off. I mean, Eddie's gang comes across as a bit too youthful to be dealing with scumbags or even running around London with these scamps. And with the neighbors being druggies, it's hard to sort of come by as to who is who because they all look the same. They all dress the same. Their manners are also not very much different, so sometimes you do get lost in the shuffle, but it is played to effect. I mean, if you follow along and don't get up for a coffee break, then you'll probably will be able to understand who's who. And I guess maybe some subtitles will get, you know, will get you far. If you don't understand British lingo. Like, I don't know half the time of what they're saying. They're speaking English, but they're speaking British English. Big difference. The more convincing cast members are from the antagonists, Hatchet Harry and Barry the Baptist, and even impressive was the character who played Big Chris, who was, of course, soccer star Vinnie Jones, who was, of course, notorious by choking a rival by the balls. But through the mindset of the East End London, it truly looks believable in the settings, being that it is dark, cold, and the scoundrels that surround the area add to the authenticity. And it actually shows a darker side of London, and that it is not all entirely blessed with royalty and fish and chips. So, in spite of the dreariness, there is a lot of excitement that comes with this movie. The soundtrack, featuring mostly rock music, also it has a blend of ska and reggae and 70s music 80s and 90s. So it's got a little bit of a mishmash, melting pot of various different musical genres to appease to whatever's choice and taste. There is no prejudices. The narration definitely keeps the story to a steady flow, and it's not afraid to add runaway gags if it feels it needs to be. When Eddie and his gang enter into a pub, we see a man in flames staggering through the door. They stare at him concernedly, nod their heads, and walk in. You know, like, yeah, if that happens to us, oh well, we're all bound to go one of these days. If it's not sooner, it's later. Or, I hope when I come out, I'm not like him. Or, I'll come in raw, but I might come out flame broiled, like him. Depending on what happens. There are a little bit of nods of Tarantino implemented into the story. Like for example, there's a pub that they sneak in, and the name of the pub is called Samoa Joe's, which is almost similar to Pulp Fiction. You know, when when Vincent and Julius walk into some guy's apartment and they're eating off of Big Kahuna burgers, and you know, Jack Rabbit Slim's restaurant. So there's also a little bit of some um, inspiration, I guess you could say, from Tarantino that is delivered in this movie. Definitely, Guy Ritchie must have been studying the directing skills of Quentin Tarantino, who, although might be an eccentric individual, he knows how to make movies in a very effective manner. Guy Ritchie, of course, is trying to emulate the style of Quentin Tarantino, but does he have what it takes to duplicate? Either way, I guess it's kind of like a form of sincere in flattery in at the expense of Tarantino. And I think Guy Ritchie does try everything he can to make this film feel like a Tarantino movie. Definitely the influences definitely has to provide, and spotting the references can almost feel a bit like a game. Like, for example, the Samoa Joes, or the pub called Jack Rabbit Slims. And along with other like Hong Kong based films and British noir films of the 50s. So, if you're an aficionado of these kind of genre movies, spotting the references could almost feel like you're playing a game, an impromptu game. The closest this film comes to striking a resemblance is the 1950 British noir film Night in the City, which which is a criminal caper set in the East End, just like Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels. And it's the story is very similar about a high stakes kingpin who hires a buffed up bodyguard to do his dirty work and to chase down a bunch of scuzzy scamps who are trying to bring this guy down, but he's just too powerful and stuff like that. And that's exactly what goes on in this movie as well. So there's a lot of very similarities between What's the one where I said again? Night in the City and Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels. So as the film comes to a close, you try and decipher what had just happened. Maybe you might need to see it a second or a third time to get a better understanding of the characters and the situations they're facing. And as it turns out, the style fairly outweighs the substance, but it never also tries to deny such claims. We don't really care much about the characters, though I was intrigued by the character Barry the Baptist over anyone else. You know, rest in peace, Lenny McLean. The film's humor factor has within the style of utilizing freeze frames, witty subtitles, and speed up and slow motion angles, which works to great effect. So the technical sides to this movie is a real plus. Even if the acting is not 100%. But then again, it doesn't want to be 100%. And if it wants to be honest with us, it's doing its job. And for that, I give it my approval. But it's still a fun slapdash film with exuberance and intrigue. So if you really can't encode to their British dialect, the characters truly add enough excitement to overcome that obstacle. So when all said and done, out of 10, I give Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels an 8. So I guess this ends my rider review. Thank you all for listening in. If you wish to subscribe to my channel, please feel free to do so. If you wish to leave a comment, go right ahead. Just remember, be kind, be courteous, and don't be rude. And I will be back again with another movie review. So until next time, this is Eric Corrupt Writer saying, keep watching those movies, and I'll see you around. Goodbye.